Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of those stories that'll make you thankful for your air conditioning, your clean tap water, and the fact that your job probably doesn't involve dodging dynamite or fever-carrying insects the size of a thumbnail. Because tonight you are a canal digger in Panama, sometime in the early 1900s, and your life is about to become a very hot, very muddy survival challenge. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to imagine all of you half asleep in your own little corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's humid. That's the first thing you notice. Not warm, not tropical. No, this is the kind of wet, heavy air that sits on your skin like a jealous cat. You've only just stepped off the boat in Cologne, Panama, and already you're peeling your shirt away from your back like it's melted on. The sky is hazy, like it can't decide whether it wants to rain or just menace you with thunder. You're wearing clothes that made sense back in New Orleans or maybe Marseille, but now they feel like the wrong uniform for the wrong war. And oh yes, it is a kind of war. Men shuffle past you, dragging tools and looking like ghosts wearing boots. You can't tell if they're tired, sick, or just empty. Probably all three. Someone coughs nearby, a harsh, wet sound. Nobody flinches. You do, but you're new. You'll learn. You're here because you answered an ad, or chased a rumor, or ran out of options back home. The promise? Steady pay for hard work. A chance to be part of history. Build a canal, they said. Connect oceans. Help carve out the future of global trade. It'll be grand. What they didn't tell you is that the canal wants to carve you out, too. As you're herded toward the work camps, you pass rows of tents and wooden shacks sagging under the weight of the jungle. The greenery doesn't just surround this place. It's reclaiming it. Roots curl under floorboards. Vines slip through windows. The trees above are so dense they block the sky, which you start to think might be a blessing. That sun is not your friend. It's a glowing, angry eyeball that never blinks. You report to the main yard. Someone barks your name. You're handed a shovel, a dented tin cup, and a cloth that's supposed to be your bedding. That's the onboarding process. No HR presentation. No orientation. Just a gesture toward the dirt and a tired-looking man muttering, "Start there." You do. Or you try to. The soil in Panama isn't just soil. It's wet, volcanic, suspiciously warm in some places, and always ready to collapse under your feet. You take one step and your boot disappears. You yank it out with a loud, embarrassing slurp, only to sink again. The guy next to you smirks. He's missing 3 teeth and most of his shirt. "You'll get used to it," he says. Then he starts coughing. He doesn't stop for a full minute. By midday, your clothes are soaked through with sweat and mud, and your shoulders are humming with the kind of pain that feels personal. A small landslide interrupts your rhythm. Just a minor one. No one even reacts, even though it almost crushes a cart and a mule. Someone shrugs and says, "Could have been worse." You nod, even though you're starting to wonder what worse really means here. The mud isn't even the worst part. The worst part is the sound, the buzzing. You think it's your imagination at first, until you realize it's constant, like a soft scream in your ears. Mosquitoes. Millions of them. You slap one off your neck. It leaves a tiny smear of blood, and you're not sure whose. One of your sleeves is already spotted red. Later, someone tells you about the 2 fevers. Yellow fever, which burns you from the inside out, and malaria, which comes in waves and never truly leaves. You try not to think about it, even as your bunkmate climbs into bed early, shivering under a sheet in the middle of a tropical afternoon. At the evening meal, you're given a ladle of beans and a piece of bread that could probably deflect bullets. You sit on a wooden crate that tips to the left every time you shift your weight. No one talks much. The men around you chew, stare, and occasionally scratch at bites. When the bell rings for lights out, a few of them shuffle off to a bar down the hill. You think about going, but you don't want to lose your cot. It's the only place in camp that's even pretending to be dry. You lie there in the dark, fanning yourself with your hat, listening to the jungle scream. Frogs, bugs, birds, you can't tell what's what. Something skitters past your cot. You don't open your eyes. Welcome to Panama. Now, if you're wondering why anyone would stay here longer than a day, well, it's complicated. The dream of the canal is a powerful thing. This canal isn't just a ditch in the ground. It's destiny. At least that's what they tell you. Newspapers call it the bridge of the world. Leaders say it's the path to peace, power, profit. You want to believe them, because if you don't, well, then you're just a guy dying slowly in a mud trench for someone else's fantasy. You learn quickly that this whole operation started with the French. A man named Ferdinand de Lesseps, famous for building the Suez Canal, decided Panama would be his next masterpiece. But this wasn't Egypt. The terrain was wrong, the methods outdated, and disease didn't care how many medals he had. You're walking through the wreckage of their failure. Abandoned equipment rusting in place. Records that say 15,000 men died under their watch, though some whisper the number was closer to 20 or even 30,000. Historians still argue about the true count. But you see the empty beds. You hear the names no one says twice. That's history enough. It's strange being here. You're at the edge of something enormous, but it feels like the edge of the world. Time doesn't flow right. The days are long and the nights blur together. Every morning, your bones ache a little more. Every night, the camp feels smaller, like it's folding in on itself. You lose track of dates. You stop writing home. There's nothing good to say. One day, you meet a man named Cooper. He's been here over a year. He gives you a piece of advice. Don't count the days. Just count the times you didn't get bit. You laugh, mostly because the alternative is crying. Then he shows you his arm covered in welts. I'm not very good at it, he admits. Some nights, the rain doesn't stop. It turns the walkways into rivers. Tents flood. Beds float. One guy builds a little raft for his shoes. You think it's a joke until he paddles past you in the dark. You both laugh. He disappears the next week. One morning, you wake up and someone in your section is gone. No one talks about it. They just shift assignments, hand out his shovel, and keep digging. You want to ask what happened, but you don't. You've learned that silence is part of the job, too. And so you dig. You dig because it's your job, because the food tastes better when you're tired, because if you stop, something might catch up with you. You don't know what that something is. Maybe it's a fever. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's just the feeling that this place is hollowing you out from the inside. But hey, the canal's getting longer. That counts for something, right? You wake up the next day with the kind of soreness that makes you question your own anatomy. Muscles you didn't even know existed are filing formal complaints. You roll off your cot, land in a puddle, because of course it rained again, and try to wring out your only pair of socks. The sun isn't even up yet, but the air is already sticky, like someone boiled the whole jungle and forgot to turn it off. As you drag your half-damp self toward the dig site, you notice something a little strange. There's a group of men crowded around a cart, all murmuring in French. You don't speak much of it yet, but tone is universal. Something's gone wrong. Again. You shuffle closer and catch a glimpse. The cart's wheel has cracked and half sunk into the mud. That's not the strange part. The strange part is the pile of bright white shirts around it. Fancy hats. Clean boots. And in the center, a man with a waxed mustache and a map that's clearly never met the ground. You've just seen your first French engineer up close. This is their operation, technically speaking. Or at least it was. They started this mess with bold plans and way too much optimism. The man in the fancy hat could be any one of the dozens of engineers and surveyors who showed up with dreams of glory and went home, if they were lucky, with sunburns, malaria, and debt. A few didn't go home at all. You overhear someone mutter Lesseps, as in Ferdinand de Lesseps, the man who led the French effort. The same guy who gave the world the Suez Canal and thought this would be the same kind of project. Sea-level canal. Straight shot. Easy, right? Except this wasn't a desert. It was a jungle. A mountain-filled, disease-crawling, landslide-happy nightmare of a jungle. The kind that doesn't just ignore your plans. It laughs at them, then throws a snake at your face for good measure. Still, when the French began in the 1880s, there was hope. There were investors. There were newspaper headlines with words like heroic and epic-defining. They poured money and men into the project. Thousands of workers, many of them Caribbean laborers like yourself, came in with shovels and dreams. And then they started dying. Fast. Some from the heat. Some from the accidents. But most from things too small to see. You don't know it yet, but right now, the greatest killer in this place weighs less than a paperclip and fits comfortably on the back of your hand. The mosquito. You're still slapping them off your neck, brushing them off your arms, and mumbling curses in whatever language bubbles up first. But the people in charge don't take them seriously. Not yet. To them, disease is a mystery, maybe caused by bad air or unlucky humors. So when men start collapsing with fevers, shaking so hard their beds rattle, the doctors blame the weather, or poor hygiene, or some vague, tropical condition. You see it for yourself after your third week here. A guy you've worked beside, Ramon, tall, strong, could swing a pick like it was made of feathers, starts coughing one morning. By that evening, he's hallucinating, clutching at invisible things in the air. By nightfall, he's gone. The next day, his cot is already occupied by someone new. You try not to think about it. There's a hospital in the camp, if you can call it that. A big wooden building with whitewashed walls and open windows to let the air through. Inside, rows of cots stretch in every direction. Some of the men are sleeping. Others are just lying there. Blank eyes, dry mouths. A few moan softly, but most are silent. The nurses work in slow, tired movements. The doctors bark orders. They don't look like they're winning. One of the older workers tells you that the French brought in some of the best doctors from Europe. But even the best doctor can't fight something he doesn't understand. They tried bleeding people, ice baths, herbal remedies. One guy swore that chewing tobacco kept the fever away. Another carried garlic cloves in his boots. None of it worked. You ask the camp cook, who seems to know everything, how many have died since the project started. He shrugs. Some say 10,000. Some say 20. Then he adds, but who's counting? There's a joke that goes around the laborers. If the canal doesn't kill you, the dinner will. You laugh the first time you hear it until you realize it's kind of true. The food isn't poisoned, exactly. It's just questionable. Cans of meat so old they've grown personalities. Rice that crunches with something you hope is just undercooked grain. Water that smells faintly metallic, like it's been through too many pipes or corpses. You start drinking coffee instead. Strong, black, bitter. The bitterness helps you forget that it's probably just boiled disease in a tin mug. Sometimes, when it's quiet and the sun's down, you hear men talking about going home. They whisper about it like a fantasy. A place where your socks stay dry. Where trees don't try to murder you with ants the size of thumbnails. Where your job doesn't involve jumping away from falling earth or sprinting from a mule cart that forgot how brakes work. But leaving isn't easy. If you're under contract, breaking it means losing your last few coins. And besides, where would you go? Back to the place where you had no job, no future, no shot? At least here, if you survive, there's a slim chance of a payout. A letter of recommendation. A story to tell your grandkids, if you ever get to have grandkids. So you stay. And you dig. You dig because the canal isn't just a trench. It's a promise. A promise made to kings and merchants and politicians who've never touched a shovel in their lives. A shortcut between oceans. A symbol of progress. You don't care about the symbolism, but you care about your friends, your meals, your next clean shirt. You care about making it to payday. The funny part is, the French don't seem to care as much anymore. Their equipment is breaking down. Their workers are dying faster than they can be replaced. Rumors swirl about bankruptcies, lawsuits, investigations back in Paris. One morning, the engineer who shouted at everyone every day just doesn't show up. No one knows why. No one seems surprised. You ask a supervisor what happens if the French leave. He just shrugs. Then someone else will come. And that's what haunts you most, maybe. The sense that this canal will happen no matter what. If it kills 1,000, 10,000, 50,000, it will still get built. Eventually. Not because it's good, but because it's wanted. So you lie in bed that night, listening to the jungle, scratching at fresh bites on your arm, and wondering which is more dangerous. The mosquitoes, the mudslides, or the men in charge who think they can beat both. You're not sure exactly when you start thinking of the mosquitoes as coworkers. Maybe it's sometime in your fourth week, when you find yourself instinctively brushing your neck every few seconds, even when nothing's there. Or when you start recognizing the different kinds by sound alone. The high whine of the small ones that nip and leave versus the low, smug buzz of the big ones that stick around, take their time, and leave you with a welt that swells like a bad promise. They're everywhere. In the tents, in the latrines, in your coffee cup if you don't watch it. You fall asleep swatting and wake up scratching. Sometimes you find one squashed on your arm in the morning, bloated with your own blood. It's gross, yes, but it also feels personal. At first, nobody really talks about it. Not the French engineers, not the doctors, not even the seasoned diggers who've been here for months. The bites are just part of the background noise, like the heat or the creaking of the carts. But then people start disappearing again. And not just from accidents or exhaustion this time. It's fever. It starts small. A guy skips a shift. Then two. You hear he's got chills and can't stop shaking. That could mean anything here, so you don't think much of it. Until the fever doesn't go away. And then you hear the word that makes everyone quiet. Yellow. As in yellow fever. You might not be a doctor, but you've seen what it does. The eyes go glassy, the skin goes clammy, and then, if you're unlucky, it all starts coming back up. Black vomit. That's the part people whisper about. It sounds like something out of a nightmare, and honestly, it kind of is. You don't know why it's black. You don't ask. You just know that once someone starts throwing it up, they don't last long. Some of the old-timers call it the black vomit death. They say it comes fast and ends faster. One moment a guy's fine. The next he's delirious, then gone. The body gets buried quick. Sometimes burned. No funeral. No Gorgas. Just a hole in the ground and a new name crossed off the logbook. But that's just one of the bug's little gifts. There's also malaria. Malaria is cruel in a different way. Plays the long game. You can go weeks feeling fine, and then boom, sweats, chills, fever that rises and falls like a drunk conductor running a train off the rails. You can survive it, sure. Some do. But it never quite leaves you. It hides in your blood like a bad idea and flares up again just when you think you're safe. You meet a guy named Thomas who says he's had malaria 7 times. 7. And he's still digging. He smiles with half his teeth and a limp, and says, "It's like a bad marriage. I hate it, but I keep coming back." You laugh but quietly, because honestly, you're terrified. Here's what makes it worse. Nobody in charge seems to believe the mosquitoes are the problem. Or if they do, they're not doing much about it. The theory that tiny flying insects could carry disease sounds ridiculous to the educated minds of the time. Most of them still think sickness comes from bad air. The miasma theory, they call it. Which is convenient because it lets them blame the swamp and not themselves. Meanwhile, you're using a wet cloth to slap mosquitoes off your face in the middle of lunch. Some workers have their own methods. You see guys rubbing tobacco juice on their skin. Others burn herbs at night to make smoke clouds in the tents. One guy even crafts a net out of old fishing line and palm fronds. You don't know if it works, but he hasn't been sick yet. At night, you overhear a group of West Indian workers quietly praying over a sick man. They talk about spirits and balance and protection. You don't ask questions. Whatever keeps them sane. It isn't until much later, years later really, that people finally connect the dots. That the real killers here are microscopic, hitching rides on those buzzing wings. You'll eventually hear the name Carlos Finley, a Cuban doctor who'd been trying to tell the world this for years. You'll hear about Dr. Walter Reed, the American who ran the experiments that finally proved it. But right now, that's not helpful. Right now, you're still just a guy in a tent with a fever creeping up the back of your neck, wondering if that last bite is going to be the one that ends you. Sometimes, at sunset, when the mosquitoes come out in full chorus and the light turns the mud golden, you feel the weight of it all. You're part of an experiment, but no one asked your permission. And even if they had, what would you have said? You're not alone. Every face you pass during the day, sunburnt, sweaty, hollow-eyed, carries the same quiet fear. No one says it, but you all know. Survival here isn't just about strength. It's about luck. It's about whether the mosquitoes like you. There's a little sign posted on the edge of the French quarters. Painted, official looking. It says, "Cleanliness is next to godliness." You pass it every morning, and every morning it makes you want to laugh and cry at the same time. Because clean? Nothing here is clean. Not the air. Not the ground. Not the water you drink. Even your skin, scrubbed raw with river soap, still smells like rot by noon. One morning, you're assigned to a different section of the dig, closer to the swamps. The supervisor just says, "Wear your scarf," and points. The area smells wrong. Thick, sour, like something is decaying underfoot. You see puddles of water that haven't moved in days. Frogs scatter as you approach. Your boots squish down into mud that gurgles like it's trying to talk. You're here to shovel debris, but all you can think about is how many mosquitoes must hatch in just one of these puddles. You try not to think about how many men this patch of ground has already taken. Later that night, lying in your cot with a thin sheet clinging to your skin, you hear someone down the row start to cough. The kind of cough that comes from somewhere deep and wet. You tense just a little. Then another voice joins in, raspy, exhausted. Eventually, you drift off to sleep to the sound of it, like some grim lullaby that's only ever sung in this place. Sometimes you wonder what your family would think if they saw you now. Covered in bites, eyes sunken, hands blistered and cracked. You want to believe they'd be proud, that they'd say you were brave. But deep down, you know what they'd probably say first? Come home. But home is far, and there's still so much dirt to move. You've stopped asking what time it is. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, and in between, you dig. Or you push carts. Or you dodge falling debris. The clock doesn't matter anymore. Not really. What matters is whether your boots are still intact, whether the rain held off long enough to dry your shirt, and whether the man in the cot next to yours woke up this morning. You get the feeling more and more that everything here is just barely holding together. Not just the workers, though yes, you're all barely functional most days, but the entire system. The logistics, the tools, the medicine, the camp. It's a miracle the canal has even made it this far, and by miracle you mostly mean pure stubbornness and a high tolerance for disaster. The hospital is full again. You walk past it every day on the way to the worksite, and each time you do, there are more men lying on the porch, waiting for a bed that probably isn't coming. The worst ones don't wait at all, they're just carried in. Sometimes two to a stretcher. You don't look too long. You've learned not to. Someone tried to put up a little sign near the entrance last week. Sick bay. Fell off the nail by Tuesday and no one put it back up. The building speaks for itself anyway. The moans, the smell of sweat and antiseptic, the flies clinging to the windows. No one's mistaking it for a chapel. You've heard stories. Not the official ones, but the ones that get whispered over cold beans at the end of a shift. About how the doctors here don't actually know what they're doing. How they try anything and everything because they're desperate. One guy swore they stuck leeches on his chest to bring down his fever. Another claimed he was treated with chilled wine. For the nerves. Someone else said the doctor offered him a prayer book and a knife, and he wasn't joking. And then there's the man they call the bleeder. You haven't seen him yourself, but apparently, he's some kind of old-school physician who still believes bloodletting works. Fever? Let's drain a pint. Fatigue? Another pint. You don't know if he's real or just a camp legend. Either way, you sleep with your sleeves rolled down now. There's no real medical plan here. The French have brought in some doctors, yes, but they spend most of their time treating the officers, the engineers, the supervisors, the surveyors who spend their days behind clipboards instead of shovels. If you're a laborer, your treatment is usually limited to being told to rest. Which is hilarious because the only thing that gets you fired faster than illness is trying to rest. One afternoon, you cut your hand on a piece of jagged metal sticking out of a supply cart. It's a clean slice, but deep. You wrap it with a strip of your shirt and keep working. There's no point in reporting it. You've seen what happens when people go to the clinic for minor injuries. They sit for hours, then get sent back with a dirty rag and a half-hearted bon courage. So you do what everyone else does. Rinse it in whatever water isn't brown, keep it dry if you can, and pray it doesn't turn green. It's hard not to think about how fragile your body really is in this place. One fever, one infected cut, one bad drink of water, That's all it takes. And not just for you, for everyone. You've seen men go from joking to shivering wrecks in less than 48 hours. You've seen others get pulled from the mud after a landslide, eyes wide open, still holding their tools. Nobody cries anymore. Not really. Maybe on the first day, maybe when they get their first letter from home. But once you've seen enough of it, enough loss, enough random, senseless breakdown, you learn to shut it off. Not because you're cold. Just because it's the only way to stay upright. There's one doctor, though, a young one, barely older than you, who actually seems to care. You see him sometimes walking through the lower camp, talking to the workers, taking notes in a little leather journal. No one knows his name, just that he listens. Actually listens. He even tried to put screens up around the infirmary windows. It didn't work. Mosquitoes still got in through the floorboards. But it was a nice thought. You hear from one of the cooks that this doctor thinks the insects might be spreading the fever. He says it's not the air. The cook tells you, poking at a pot of something grayish. It's the bites. You nod like you agree, though the idea still sounds weird. You don't understand how a tiny insect could carry something so deadly. Then again, nothing here makes sense. Why not that too? There's an invisible line between what the French workers get and what you get. They live in better quarters, wooden houses on stilts with porches and chairs. They eat imported meat, fresh fruit, real bread. They have medical teams assigned to their camps, trained nurses, and actual bedding. Meanwhile, you sleep in canvas tents that collapse in the rain, and the only thing fresh about your meals is the mold. It's not just inconvenient. It's insulting. You all bleed the same into this dirt. But the hierarchy is clear. You dig, they direct. You get sick, they get treated. You die, and they maybe sign a paper about it. Maybe. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering if any of this is worth it. Not in the grand sense. Of course the canal will matter to the people who finish it. But you'll be lucky if anyone remembers your name. You're one of thousands. One of the invisible ones. But then, one morning you look out over the Culebra Cut. That's what they're calling the trench that slices through the Continental Divide. It's chaos. Still. An enormous, shifting canyon of brown earth and broken rail cars. But it's getting deeper. Wider. You can see progress, and it's strange how proud that makes you feel. You didn't build it alone, obviously, but some part of it has your sweat in it. Your blood. Your lost hours. You stand there for a minute, longer than usual, just watching the mist rise off the rocks. A train rumbles by, piled high with rubble. The driver waves. You wave back. Then someone yells for you to get moving. And just like that, you're back in it. Back to the tools. Back to the coughing. Back to the hope that maybe, just maybe, your hand won't get infected, your stomach won't turn on you, and you'll survive long enough to dig something that matters. You probably wouldn't call yourself an optimist at this point, but there's one thing you still cling to, the money. That was the deal, right? You suffer, you dig, you sweat through every piece of clothing you brought, and in exchange you get paid. Maybe not a fortune, but enough to send home. Enough to save a little. Maybe even enough to imagine a different kind of life when all this is over. But of course, that's where the joke really starts. You remember the numbers from the ad or the recruiter's pitch. 20 cents an hour. Maybe 25. Plus board. They said like that meant something here. You imagined it would stack up fast. That all your suffering would at least come with a cushion of silver coins jingling in your pocket by month's end. And for the first few days you don't question it. You're too busy trying not to pass out. But then payday comes. Or something like payday. You line up with the others under the corrugated iron roof of the pay station. Heart beating a little faster. You haven't seen actual currency since you got here. It's almost exciting. And then they hand you your wages. It's not money. It's scrip. Little paper notes printed by the company, with your name scribbled on them and numbers that look vaguely like amounts. You blink at them for a few seconds, wondering if this is a mistake. But no, this is what everyone gets. These aren't dollars. These are basically monopoly bills that you can only use inside the canal zone. You try to buy something at the camp store, maybe a real bar of soap or a piece of fruit that isn't bruised into a science experiment, and you realize the prices are double what they should be. They know. Of course they know. It's the company's store. It's the only store. and you've just been handed money that's only valid here, at inflated prices with no alternative. Someone behind you mutters the phrase, wage slavery. You don't say it out loud, but you're definitely thinking it. You meet a guy who's been here 6 months. Gregoire, from Martinique, and he tells you his trick. Save all the scrip and trade it with one of the cooks, who occasionally sneaks off to town and can smuggle back real goods. It's risky, and not officially allowed, but sometimes it's the only way to get fresh bread or a bottle of something that burns in your chest but feels like dignity. The scrip isn't even consistent. Sometimes your hours get cut for rain, and the reduction shows up immediately in your envelope. Other times you're promised a bonus for extra shifts or dangerous work, but it never arrives. Administrative delay, they say. You stop believing in bonuses after the second lie. And then there's the roll. You didn't understand it at first, but it's become painfully clear now. Workers here are sorted into 2 groups, the gold roll and the silver roll. It sounds harmless enough, like some payroll filing system, until you realize what it actually means. Gold roll workers are mostly white. Engineers, managers, supervisors, clerks. They get paid in US dollars. They get access to nicer housing, better food, cleaner water, actual leisure time. Silver roll workers? That's you. That's the West Indians, the Africans, the South Asians, and yes, a few Europeans who didn't come from the right background or sign the right contract. You get paid in scrip. You live in the tents and barracks on the low ground. Your showers are a barrel with holes punched in it. Your drinking water sometimes smells like it came out of the trench. No one announces this system, but you see it everywhere. The gold roll men wear crisp uniforms, even in this heat. They get seats under the shaded canopies during meals. You eat standing up if you get a plate at all. They have a separate mess hall, separate laundry, even a separate graveyard. There's a part of you that's angry, furious actually, and there's another part that's just tired. Too tired to fight it. Too tired to believe that complaining will change anything. You see how things are enforced here, not with guards but with expectations. With the casual indifference of the people above you. With a shrug and a that's just how it is. One of the few small freedoms you have is the Saturday night market. Workers from different camps gather just outside the official zone, where the company can't control everything, and try to trade or sell what little they've got. Someone brings roasted plantains. Someone else has hand-rolled cigarettes. You bring an extra pair of socks that barely have holes in them. It's loud and dusty and smells like sweat and spice, but for a couple hours it feels human. You're reminded that you're not just a cog in someone's machine. You're part of a strange, living network of people who are all trying to survive the same storm. You learn to get creative with money, or the absence of it. A bar of soap becomes currency. A shirt with fewer patches is a luxury item. One guy manages to carve tiny figures out of scrap wood and sells them for slices of cooked yam. You think about doing something similar, but carving takes time, and time is what you never seem to have. On Sundays, if you're lucky enough to have one off, you head into town with a few others. Panama City is a whole different world. Chaotic, colorful, noisy, with smells and music that hit you like a wall. You hear English, Spanish, French, Creole. You buy a mango for real money, and it tastes like sunshine. But the moment you step back through the gates of the canal zone, you feel it, the shift. Like walking through a door and leaving your name behind. Some men write home and exaggerate their pay, their job, their accommodations. You hear them dictating letters to one another at night. Yes, Mama, I am well. The work is good. The pay is generous. I send love and coin. Maybe it's a kindness. Maybe it's a lie they tell themselves to get through another day. You don't blame them. You do it too. Because the truth that you're breaking your back for paper money you can't use, for a job that doesn't care if you make it through the week, for a place that will forget your name the second you collapse, isn't something most people want to read. One night, you sit by the fire pit with a few others, passing around a half bottle of rum someone smuggled in from the coast. No one talks for a while. The flames crackle. The sky is full of stars, but you can barely see them through the haze. Then someone asks, "What will you do when this is over?" The answers come slow. Go back to Barbados. Open a store. Buy land. Never look at another shovel again. When it's your turn, you shrug. You don't know. You just hope there's something left of you when the last coin drops. You wake up to the sound of shouting. Not the usual get moving kind of shout. This one has urgency to it, like something's wrong and about to get worse. You roll out of bed, already sweating, and run outside with one boot half on. It's not even light yet. The sky is a strange color, grayish-purple, like it's been bruised. A few men are already down by the cut, waving their arms, pointing. You follow the noise, unsure if this is another accident, a fire, or maybe something worse. Turns out it's just another day. Except this time, the side of the excavation has collapsed. Again. You've seen landslides before. You've even helped dig a few people out of them. But this one is bigger. The slope had looked fine yesterday. Stable, even. But the thing about this place, the canal, the jungle, the soil, is that it never really sleeps. It shifts. It moves. It waits. And then, without warning, it takes. There's no dramatic rumble, no warning crack. Just a low, wet thump, followed by shouting, and then silence. You arrive in time to see the dust settling. A piece of rail has bent like a ribbon. One of the carts is flipped over, half submerged in fresh mud. You count quickly, 6 men were down there this morning. 3 come up coughing. The rest, not yet. A rescue team starts digging. You join without being told. Shovels, hands, anything. You claw through the earth because that's what you do when you're here. You dig. You hope. And you try not to wonder if next time it'll be you under there. They pull one guy out after 20 minutes. He's breathing. Barely. The next one isn't. You recognize his shirt. He traded with you just 2 days ago for an extra spoon. No one says his name. They just lay him off to the side. Like a broken tool someone's not sure what to do with yet. This is the thing no one really tells you when you sign up to build a canal. It's not just about water and locks and terrain. It's about weight. Not just physical weight, though yes, the soil is heavy and always wet, but emotional weight. The weight of knowing that every foot of progress might cost a life, and that life might not even make the daily report. You keep digging. Later that morning, once the mess is somewhat cleared and the site deemed safe enough, you're handed a new assignment. Rock breaking. This means dynamite. There's no formal safety briefing. Just a supervisor who points to a ridge and says, "We need that gone by tomorrow." You've seen explosives used before. Sometimes it's done carefully with planning. Other times it's less so. This is one of those times. You and 2 others carry the sticks up the slope. One guy has a drill to make holes. The other carries fuses. You watch them like your life depends on it, because it does. The drill wobbles. The fuse guy's hands shake. You're not even sure how deep the charge should go. No one seems to be. Eventually, someone lights the fuse and yells. You all run. Not far enough. The blast hits harder than you expect, and a chunk of rock flies past your head like a message from the gods. When the dust clears, the ridge is still there, but now angrier. You cough, wipe your eyes, and go back up. This is normal. Every part of this job feels like it was designed to test how much you're willing to risk for the chance to make it one more day. Between the landslides, the collapsing scaffolding, and the surprise explosions, it's not even clear what counts as an accident anymore. The line between unfortunate event and normal workday has completely disappeared. You hear a rumor later in the week. Someone was buried in a cave-in near Calabar Cut and never recovered. They just marked the spot and kept digging around him. You think it's a joke until you see a rough wooden plank with initials scratched into it. Just 3 letters. No date. No ceremony. It shouldn't still surprise you, but it does. One evening, you finally get a chance to visit the memorial ground. You'd heard about it, how the French had set up a space with stone crosses and a statue of some kind. For the fallen, they said. You wanted to believe it might be a place of honor. Maybe even beauty. But when you get there, it's small. Uneven. Half the markers are crooked. Some names are faded. Others are just numbers. A few wooden crosses lean against a wall, clearly never planted in the ground. And the statue? It's chipped and tilted forward, like it gave up standing tall. You stare at it for a long time, not because it comforts you, but because it makes something in your chest ache. So many lives lost, And this is the best they could do. A stone with no names. A statue that doesn't care. On your way back to camp, you pass a group of kids watching the trains from the hill. They're laughing, shouting, playing some game with sticks and bottle caps. Their joy cuts through the air like sunlight. For a moment, you forget the mud, the fatigue, the fear. You just watch them. You try to remember what that kind of lightness feels like. One of them waves at you. You wave back. And then you keep walking because there's still work to do. There's always work to do. The next day, you return to the same site, and someone has placed a small wooden charm near the spot where the slide happened. You don't know who left it or what it means. It's a simple thing, tied with string, maybe carved with a nail. You look at it for a while before picking up your shovel again. You don't believe in luck. Not anymore. But sometimes you like to pretend. You start noticing the water more than you used to. Not just the river-sized trench you're helping carve through a continent, but the water that drips, seeps, puddles, pools, boils, and most dangerously sits everywhere. It sits in the grooves of old carts, in the divots your boots leave in the mud, in forgotten buckets left out overnight. The humidity wraps around you like wet fabric, and nothing you own is ever fully dry again. Not your shirt, not your bedding, not your skin, but it's the water you have to drink that starts to haunt you. At first, you think the taste is just different, metallic, maybe earthy. But one afternoon you spot a worker crouched by the camp barrel, scooping out a dead lizard with a stick. He tosses it away like it's a pebble and keeps filling his cup. You watch, stunned, and he shrugs. Wasn't in there long. You stop using that barrel. But the thing is, there are only so many barrels. And the sun is relentless. You can't keep working 10, 12 hours a day in that heat without water. You try boiling it when you can. Other times, you hold your breath and just drink fast like speed will outrun the bacteria. Spoiler, it doesn't. Soon, you start hearing stories. Not whispers this time, outright warnings. Guys dropping with stomach cramps so sharp they fold over mid-shift. Diarrhea that turns bloody. Vomiting that doesn't stop. Someone says it's dysentery. Someone else says cholera. You don't know the difference, only that both are awful, and both are in the water. The medics, when they bother to come, hand out powders and potions with names no one can pronounce. Some of them help. Some of them taste like death and do nothing. Mostly, the best cure is not getting sick to begin with, which feels like asking you to survive a knife fight by politely asking the other guy not to stab. You try to be cautious. You cover your mug. You rinse it twice before every refill. You steal an extra cloth to drape over the opening. But there's only so much control you have here. One bad scoop and that's it. Game over. The water doesn't care if you're careful. It has its own plans. You know a man named Isaac. Big guy, usually cheerful, always humming old hymns. He gets sick after a long day in the sun. Nothing major at first. Just a headache, he says. Then nausea. Then he stops showing up to dig. When you visit him in the tent, he's thinner. Sunken. He tells you he can't keep anything down. Even the water makes it worse. You try to sit with him when you can. He says he's praying it's just heat exhaustion. You don't tell him what you think. By the end of the week, his cot is empty. You hear later that his body was buried with 5 others in a shared grave near the back of the camp. The rain had made individual plots too messy. There's no record. Just another name gone. At meals, the cooks try to boil the water when they can, but half the time the firewood is too wet or too scarce. You still see people using buckets straight from the river, especially in the afternoons when the barrels run low. Better than nothing, they say. But that isn't true. Sometimes nothing is better. You start dreaming of ice. Not even to drink. Just to touch. Just to hold a glass full of it, hear the clink. Imagine the cold. A bartender in a white shirt. A clean bar top. The scent of lemon. It feels like something from another life. One night, you hear that someone up in the gold roll section has installed a proper filtration system. Sounds like myth. Purified water. Actual plumbing. There's even talk of ice machines. The word passes through the camp like smoke. You don't know if it's true, but just thinking about it stings in a way you can't explain. When the Americans took over from the French, they brought new rules, new equipment, and supposedly new standards. You heard promises. Better sanitation, Cleaner quarters, more oversight. And to be fair, they're trying. There's a guy, Lieutenant something, who walks the camp with a notebook, inspecting latrines and barking about standing water. You see workers hired to dump oil on puddles, meant to suffocate mosquito larvae. There's talk of building new water towers. But progress is slow, and you're still drinking from a barrel that smells like old meat. Some of the older workers say it's still better than when the French were in charge. Back then, they say you drink straight from a creek and just hope. Others say it's all the same. Different masters, same thirst. Meanwhile, your body adapts. Sort of. You get used to the dull stomach ache that comes and goes. You stop reacting to the taste. You learn which barrels to avoid and which ones are less awful. You even learn to hold your breath while swallowing, to avoid the aftertaste. A man named Chandra shows you how to make a filter using charcoal and cloth. He says his uncle taught him back in Trinidad. You try it once. It works okay until the cloth grows mold. Then you go back to the barrel. Sometimes, late at night, you joke about it with the others. If the mosquitoes don't get us, the water will. You all laugh, but no one finds it funny. It's the kind of laugh that stops at your mouth and never quite reaches your eyes. You hear that, in the American quarters, there's a place where the water comes out of a tap. Like in real cities. You can't imagine it. Here, every drink feels like a dare. You try to write a letter home about it. But how do you explain that the very thing keeping you alive might be the thing that kills you? So you don't. You write about the heat, about the work. You say you're doing well. You sign it with love. And then you take a sip from your cup, hold it in your mouth for a second, and swallow hard. The next morning, someone new arrives in camp, eyes wide and uniform too clean. He asks you where the drinking water is. You point to the barrel and say, "Right there." Then you pause. And you say, "Hold your breath." By now, you've probably accepted that your job isn't really just digging. That's the simple version they tell you when you sign up. Canal laborer. Sounds straightforward. Pickaxe, shovel, sweat, done. But after a few months in the canal zone, you start to realize that your job description shifts daily, depending on what the jungle decides to throw at you. And lately, you've become something of a reluctant geologist. You didn't ask for the promotion. It just kind of happened. One minute you're hacking away at soft clay, and the next your shovel clangs against something solid that makes your arms vibrate. It doesn't give. It doesn't move. You stare at it, wipe the sweat from your forehead, and say what everyone says the first time they hit basalt. What the hell is this? You learn quickly that not all dirt is the same. Some of it crumbles like cake. Some clings like it's trying to climb you. Some turns into soup when it rains. And some, like the thick volcanic rock under the central spine of Panama, laughs in the face of your tools. It's called Culebra Cut, this long, narrow stretch slicing through the continental divide. The backbone of the canal. The part where everyone knew the digging would be hardest. And you've just been reassigned there. Lucky you. They say the rock here is ancient. Layers upon layers of volcanic ash, hardened over time into material that feels like concrete mixed with rage. And the worst part? It doesn't behave. Some layers crumble too easily, others are so dense they snap drill bits in half. What should take a week often takes a month. You spend your days learning to read the earth. You squint at the color of soil to figure out how deep the water's gone. You tap rocks with the butt of your pick to guess how solid they are. You begin to feel the difference in your bones. A certain kind of vibration means move back. Another kind means brace yourself. Nobody trained you for this. You just adapt or you get buried. Literally. One afternoon, you're working alongside a guy named Emilio. He's been here over a year and knows things you haven't learned yet. He points to a ledge you're about to climb and says, "Don't stand under that. Looks dry, but it's breathing." You blink at him. "Breathing." He nods. The rock shifts when the sun hits it. Expands, contracts. If it exhales while you're under it, you're done. You step back. He smiles. Smart. The digging at Culebra is more than just physical, it's psychological. You're never sure what's beneath your feet. You could be walking on something stable, or something waiting to slide. The slopes are steep, and when the rain comes, everything changes. Entire walls that looked safe in the morning crumble by evening. Mud flows like lava, silent and sudden. There's a section they call Murder Ridge. It's not an official name, obviously, but everyone knows it. Too many collapses. Too many buried tools. Too many men who didn't come back up. You get assigned there for 2 days. You don't sleep either night. And then there's the dynamite. You thought you'd gotten used to it. The noise, the timing, the running. But now you're in rocky territory, and things get unpredictable. Some blasts barely make a dent. Others dislodge entire slabs that tumble in slow, horrible silence. You watch one fall like a sliding puzzle piece, crushing 2 carts and nearly taking a mule with it. Later, you hear someone joke, "The mountain decides who gets to pass." It's not funny, but it's not wrong either. The Americans have brought in heavier equipment, steam shovels, drill wagons, massive carts, but even these machines struggle here. The shovels jam. The drills overheat. The carts tip. More than once, you've watched a piece of machinery get stuck so deep it has to be abandoned where it fell. One time, a steam shovel literally sank. Gone in 2 hours. Just disappeared into the slope. And the worst part? The stuff you dig out? You have to move it. Somewhere. Anywhere. Mountains of loose earth piling up along the tracks. If you don't move it fast enough, it slides back into the cut like the land is trying to reclaim what you stole. You begin to think of the canal as a loop. You dig. You dump. The earth says no thanks and slides back in. You dig again. It's not progress, it's negotiation. You start using phrases like angle of repose and saturation threshold. Even though you have no idea what they mean, you just hear the engineers shouting them often enough. You fake it. Everyone fakes it. You overhear one of the white supervisors say that the geology of this region is still not fully understood. A polite way of saying, "We're guessing." You believe it. There's something humbling about working against the land itself. Machines rust. Shovels break. Maps lie. But the earth? It just is. It has time. You're the one racing the clock. Still, you do your part. You chip away. You move cart after cart of rock. You sweat through shirts until they're more salt than fabric. And somehow the canal creeps forward, inches at a time. You know it won't last forever. The land is already changing. People talk about elevation. Locks. The sea level canal idea, what the French wanted, has been abandoned. Too dangerous, they say. Too unstable. Now, they're planning a series of artificial lakes and chambers that will raise and lower ships like an elevator. It's complex, technical, and above your pay grade. All you know is it means more digging. Sometimes you dream of the ocean, not just because of the heat, but because you're tired of looking at dirt. You imagine standing on a dock, watching a finished ship pass through the completed canal, waving goodbye to people who will never know what it took to build it. You wonder if you'll live long enough to see that day. But right now, your feet are back in the dust. There's a new layer of rock to tackle. A mule that refuses to move. A wheelbarrow with a cracked axle. You fix it. You push forward. You keep going. Because down here, buried in the bones of a continent, even survival feels like a kind of victory. You don't see it happen all at once, but slowly, over weeks and months, the rhythm of everything around you begins to shift. The signs are small at first. A different kind of whistle echoing through camp. A new flag over the administration building. The arrival of equipment that looks newer, shinier, louder. And then, one morning, you hear someone say it outright, while ladling beans into a tin plate. The Americans are running things now. And just like that, the French are out. No ceremony. No announcement. They just start disappearing. Fewer white straw hats in the planning tents. Less yelling in French. You see a few of them pack up their trunks and walk toward the docks, shoulders hunched like men quietly exiting a lost bet. And the Americans? They arrive like they mean business. Not just with more men but with trains, crates, machines that look like they were built by someone who's never heard the phrase good enough. They come in with a new plan, new blueprints, and what feels like twice the volume. They shout orders in English. Their boots don't sink into the mud. Their uniforms are crisp even in the rain. You've been here long enough to know better than to celebrate too quickly. New management doesn't always mean better life. Usually it just means a new kind of confusion. The first thing the Americans do is take inventory of everything: equipment, soil samples, sleeping quarters. You watch them walk around with clipboards, measuring tape, and too much confidence. One of them asks you how many hours you work a day. You say, "When it's light, I work. When it's dark, I sleep." He doesn't write that down. Then they start moving people. Tents are reorganized. Barracks reassigned. Tools are collected, counted, redistributed. Suddenly, your pickaxe isn't yours anymore. It belongs to Section 3, and you have to sign it out each morning. They're building a system. You can't tell yet if it's a system for making the canal more efficient, or just making your life more complicated. A few weeks in, they change your schedule. Start time is now 6 a.m. sharp. You get a new foreman, American, with a clipped mustache and a voice like sandpaper. He doesn't know your name. He barely knows what you do. But he calls you son and tells you, "We're gonna whip this project into shape." You try not to visibly roll your eyes. To their credit, the Americans move fast. They bring in doctors who actually seem to know what they're doing. You see teams laying real drainage. Mosquito nets go up around certain quarters, not yours, of course, but still. They clean out standing water. They pave walkways. Someone even installs proper latrines. But for every improvement, there's something strange. You start hearing unfamiliar phrases: zoning, segregation policy, administrative classification. You don't fully understand what they mean until one morning, when you try to visit a friend in a different section and get stopped by a man with a clipboard and a gun. "Your silver roll," he says. "That's a gold roll, camp." You stare at him. He points back the way you came. Silver stays with silver. You'd heard the terms before, but now they're literal boundaries. Fences, checkpoints, schedules that don't match. The gold roll workers, mostly white Americans, get meat 3 times a week. Real coffee. Fans in their sleeping quarters. You get beans. You get scrip. You get a scolding if you're 5 minutes late. They say it's for efficiency, for order, but it doesn't feel like order. It feels like a line has been drawn in the mud, and you're on the side without shoes. You notice it everywhere now. Different drinking fountains, different train cars, different entrances to the mess hall. You're not allowed to use the main canteen anymore. Even the graveyards are separate. You don't get angry, not exactly. It's a quieter thing than that. A dullness, a reminder, as if the canal has always known its hierarchy, and now it's just putting it in writing. Still, the work continues, and the canal, for all its politics and problems, is starting to look real. Locks are being planned. Giant steel gates shipped in pieces from far-off factories. Massive reservoirs carved out of the jungle. They're building a dam somewhere north of here, Gatun, they call it. It'll flood a huge valley and become one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. It sounds impossible. But then again, so did this entire project. One evening, you're working near a newly cleared path where a future lock chamber will sit. The supervisor hands you a blueprint, points to a rectangle, and says, "That'll hold a ship the size of a building." You look at the empty trench, the mosquitoes dancing in the air above it, the soft, crumbling walls. You nod and say, "Sure it will," but part of you believes it, because despite everything, despite the unfair pay, the danger, the long hours, you can see it now, not just imagine it. The canal is happening. The locks are taking shape. The jungle is being pushed back, reluctantly, but still. And the ocean? You swear you can smell it sometimes when the wind shifts just right. You watch a new train roll by. Shiny. American-made. Pulling 20 carts of rubble. 2 months ago, that would have taken 4 mules and a full day. You hate to admit it, but the machines do make a difference. The Americans are making the canal move faster. Whether that's good for you is still unclear. You think about the French a lot these days. About their pride, their vision, their failure. They were builders, sure, but they weren't listeners. They came here thinking Panama would bend to their will, and when it didn't, they broke. The Americans are different. They bring their own arrogance, sure, but also a kind of brutal pragmatism. If something doesn't work, they tear it out and try something new. They're not here to prove a point. They're here to finish the canal, even if they have to stomp over everyone to do it. You know better than to get in the way. Still, late at night, when the camp is quiet and the jungle hums its endless lullaby, you wonder what's being built here. Really. Canal, yes. But also a system. A structure where some people rise and others stay buried, sometimes literally. You lie back on your cot, hands behind your head, staring at the roof of your tent. You listen to the distant rumble of another train. Another blast. Another long day beginning before the last one ever really ended. And you think, not for the first time, history's being written here. You just hope it doesn't forget who held the pen. It sneaks up on you, this new layer of rules. At first, it's subtle. You're told to move your cot to a different part of the camp. Then someone paints a number on your tent. Then, suddenly, there are colored tags on your clothes, your work pass, even your food voucher. You don't remember signing up for a color-coded life, but here you are. They call it organization. You call it something else. By now, the Americans are firmly in charge, and with that has come a brand new system for dividing the workers. By race, by nationality, by perceived importance. It's not just the gold roll and silver roll anymore. It's where you're allowed to live, what you're allowed to eat, what kind of soap you get, whether your building has a window. You're in the silver zone. Not officially a name they use on paper, but everyone calls it that. It's the part of the camp that smells a little riper, where the laundry never dries completely, where the beds creak louder and the food is served colder. It's not that anyone says you're worth less. They just act like it. You work next to men from Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Martinique, even India. Your accents don't match, but your stories do. You compare meals, wages, tools. Sometimes you laugh about it. Other times you just shake your heads. You all know the rules by now. If you're white, American, and here on salary, you get one kind of life. If you're not, you get another. You watch a man named Clark, big, sharp-eyed from Kingston, get turned away from the dispensary one afternoon. He's got a fever, maybe malaria, maybe just heat exhaustion. Doesn't matter. The nurse at the Gold Roll Clinic doesn't even let him explain. Wrong roll, she says, without looking up. So he goes back to the Silver Infirmary, where the beds are packed, the fans broken, and the medicine often missing. You sit with him for a while, help him keep the rag on his forehead wet, and pretend you believe he'll be fine. He isn't. The funeral is fast, quiet, mostly dirt and prayer. You go back to work the next day like everyone else. It gets to you more than you expect. Not just Clark, but what his death represents. You start paying more attention. You notice how the Gold Roll mess hall gets fresh fruit twice a week, while yours gets rice cooked in what might be grease and regret. You see how their quarters have glass windows, while yours have holes patched with burlap. You notice the library. Did you even know there was a library? Turns out there is, but only for Gold Roll employees. You stand outside one day and peek through the window. Rows of books. Fans turning slowly overhead. Chairs with cushions. A man in a clean shirt sits reading a newspaper dated the same day. You haven't read a paper in a month. You haven't sat in a real chair in longer. Someone walks past and says, "Keep moving." You do. The worst part isn't the inequality. You're not naive. You've seen unfairness before. It's the fact that it's all done so calmly. There's no shouting. No signs. No one yells slurs or swings fists. They just nod, record your name, hand you your label, and move you along. The machine runs smoothly, and you're part of the machinery that gets oiled last. You meet a man named Ezra who keeps a diary. He writes in it every night after supper, head down, lips moving silently. You ask what he's writing. He says, "So my grandchildren will know I didn't imagine it." Imagine what? All of it. You nod. Sometimes the differences aren't even about facilities, they're about expectations. A Gold Roll worker is late. The supervisor pats his back and jokes about tough mornings. A Silver Roll worker is late. You lose half a day's pay. No explanation needed. You get the feeling you're being watched more closely. Not because they need you to do your job better, but because they need to keep you in line. There's a rumor that someone tried to protest. A letter, maybe. Petition. It disappeared before it reached the administration office. The man who started it? quietly reassigned to a site so remote no one's seen him since. No one talks about it anymore. And yet, you stay. You stay because you need the money, however little. You stay because there's a strange kind of pride in finishing what others couldn't. You stay because the idea of the canal, this impossible cut between oceans, is still too big to let go. One afternoon, during a break, you sit by the tracks with a few others. A train rolls by, gold-plated letters on the side. Canal Commission. Inside are men in suits, sipping drinks, looking out at the jungle like it's a zoo enclosure. They don't wave. They don't even seem to see you. Beside you, someone mutters, "Must be nice." Someone else answers, "One day." You don't know what that means. One day we'll be in that car. One day things will change. One day will matter. Maybe. You get up, brush the dirt off your pants, and head back to the site. There's still work to do. Always work to do. You're not sure when the men in white coats first start showing up in camp. They're not supervisors. They don't carry tools. They're too clean, too quiet, always watching, always scribbling in little notebooks. At first, you think they're inspectors, here to measure something or fire someone. But they don't fire anyone. They just keep taking notes, asking strange questions. How often do you get bitten? Where do you store your water? Do you sleep under a net? You start hearing a name, Gorgas. Dr. William Gorgas, from the U.S. Army. People talk about him with the kind of cautious reverence usually reserved for priests or men who hold rifles. Apparently, he has a theory, a radical one according to the old-timers. He believes mosquitoes, those tiny, infuriating things you've been swatting since day one, are the cause of all this death. Not just yellow fever. Not just malaria. Everything. First, you're skeptical. How could something so small bring down grown men like trees in a storm? But then you remember the way Ramon shook in his bed until he didn't wake up. The way Clark's eyes dulled in just 2 days. You remember the fever dreams. The itching. The burn behind your eyes. You've lived inside this theory. You just didn't know it had a name. And now, apparently, you're part of the solution. The Americans have declared war on mosquitoes, and that makes you, whether you like it or not, a frontline soldier. They don't tell you directly, of course. They just start handing out new assignments. Suddenly, you're clearing brush instead of rocks. You're hauling buckets of oil instead of dynamite. One morning, you find yourself with a long pole and a tin can, told to pour kerosene into puddles. "Every one of those is a nursery," the man says. "No puddle, no babies." You nod like you understand. You don't, fully.
But-you pour anyway.
They start draining swamps, burning garbage, installing screens over windows. There are posters now with pictures of mosquitoes drawn like little devils. Protect your water. Report all standing pools. It's like the entire canal zone has been given a new enemy. And for once, it's not the mud, or the heat, or the rock. It's the buzz. The work is strange. You're told to fill holes you didn't dig, destroy containers that don't belong to anyone, and cover barrels that you used just yesterday. If you argue, they say it's for the mission. If you don't argue, they hand you a rake and point to the marsh. Some men are assigned to fumigation squads. They walk through the camps with metal canisters, pumping smoke into buildings until the air stings your eyes. They say it kills larvae. You're not sure what it does to lungs, but they don't seem worried about that. Others, yourself included, are roped into a campaign to track fever cases. You're given a clipboard and a list of names. Every afternoon, you go door to door, checking who's sick, who's missing, who's been moved. You don't like this job. It feels too close to counting ghosts. But someone has to do it. And slowly, very slowly, something begins to shift. Fewer moans from the infirmary. Fewer sheets hung out in warning. Fewer burials before dawn. Not none. Never none. But less. People talk about it in hushed voices, as if saying it out loud will jinx the spell. You sit by the fire with your friends one night, and someone says, "Feels lighter." No one answers right away, but you all know what he means. One of the doctors, an assistant to Gorgas, maybe sits with your group one evening. Young, nervous, trying too hard to speak in your dialect. He tells you they've mapped mosquito movement, that they know the breeding cycle, that they're finally ahead of the disease. You ask, why now? He looks at you, blinks and says, because now we believe it. You don't say what you're thinking. That you believed it the first time you buried a friend. That you didn't need a microscope or a chart. That belief is a luxury. You've been living in the proof. Still, you nod. Let him feel like a hero. In the following weeks, the health campaign expands. Inspectors check every corner of the camp. They fine people for uncovered barrels, abandoned tins, unwashed bedding. You hear of a man being removed from his job because he kept a flower pot with too much water in it. You stop asking questions. You just comply. It's easier that way. There's a kind of irony in all this. For years, the French failed to solve the problem with steam shovels and sea-level canals. But the turning point came not from a new machine or a new excavation method, but from going after the smallest enemy. And the most uncomfortable truth? It worked. It is working. You see it in the way men walk now. Less of the coughing shuffle. More upright steps. The camps don't smell quite so sweet with rot. The infirmary isn't overflowing every morning. You don't hear the phrase black vomit nearly as much. One morning, you realize you haven't seen a mosquito in 2 days. You sit on the edge of your cot, holding that thought like a fragile thing. You wait for the buzzing, the itch, the slap. Nothing comes. You let out a breath you didn't know you'd been holding. Of course, no one throws a parade. No one gives a speech. There's still a canal to build. But in the back of your mind, there's this tiny, persistent flicker of relief. You might still break your leg. You might still get buried under a landslide. But maybe, just maybe, you won't die of something with wings and no name. You pass the infirmary again that evening. There's a new sign above the door. A quote, neatly painted. You stop to read it. Science is the lamp that guides us through the darkness. You're not sure who said it. You're not even sure you believe it. But for the first time in a long time, you walk past that building without flinching. And that, you think, might be what hope feels like. You hear it before you see it. A distant rattle, like coins in a metal box, rising slowly from the jungle. Then a low groan. Then the unmistakable clang of steel on steel. You pause, wipe the sweat from your eyes, and there it is. Another train, loaded with dirt, rocks, and whatever else the canal has decided to cough up this week. The railroad has become the veins of this project. Without it, the canal would have choked on its own debris a long time ago. The engineers figured out early on that digging is only half the job. The other half is getting rid of everything you've dug. And for that, they needed trains. Not one or two. Hundreds. Miles of track. Carts that never stop moving. Trains that run like clockwork except when they don't, which is often and terrifying. You've been reassigned again, now to one of the excavation zones where you work alongside the railway crews. Your new job isn't digging or blasting. It's loading. You shovel dirt, rocks, and sometimes entire logs into open-topped rail cars under a sun that feels like it's been personally assigned to punish you. Then, when the whistle blows, you step back, count your limbs, and pray that the train doesn't decide to start rolling early. Because here's the thing, the trains don't stop. Well, technically they do, but not for long. Not for people. And definitely not for you. There's a man in your section, Marcel, from Guadeloupe, who used to work trackside. One day he dropped a tool and bent down to grab it. The train rolled 2 inches too far. He lost 3 fingers. Came back to work the next day with the hand wrapped in cloth and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You still see him now, trying to tie knots with one hand and a piece of string in his teeth. They say one of the American supervisors lost his boot under a cart and pulled his foot out just in time. His replacement, another man from Alabama, wasn't so lucky. Nobody talks about that one. There are rules, of course. You're supposed to stand back, to keep the tracks clear, to follow the hand signals. But when you're on your 5th cart of the morning, sweat dripping into your eyes, hands blistered, and the foreman shouting, "Move faster," those rules blur. The train engineers ride high, in shaded cabs, hands on levers, barely glancing down. They sound the horn twice before moving. That's the warning. That's all you get. 2 short blasts. If you're in the way, that's on you. It's not personal. It's just momentum. And there's always so much to move. The spoil, what they call the useless earth and rock, has to go somewhere. So they send it down the tracks to makeshift dumps all over the zone. Some of it's used to build embankments. Some just gets piled into hills that didn't exist before this job started. The land is reshaping itself in reverse. Dig here, pile there, shift everywhere. One day, you're sent to work a line called the moving mountain. That's not a metaphor. It's literally a giant pile of dirt that moves, settles, slides, cracks in the night. You load a cart with soil from the cut, send it down the tracks, and by next morning, half of it has oozed back toward where you started. It's like fighting a tide made of mud. You and the others develop a rhythm. Load, signal, step back, watch it go. The trains become a kind of heartbeat, even when they scare you half to death. Sometimes you don't even hear them anymore. You just feel them coming, through the soles of your boots. There's a small shack near the bend in the rail where the engineers eat lunch. One day, you sneak close enough to hear their conversation. They're talking about grades, loads, brakes. One of them says, "These West Indian boys, man, they move faster than the shovels." You can't tell if it's a compliment or not. You don't stay to find out. Back at your section, a new worker arrives. Barely 18. Quiet. From Curacao, you think. He doesn't speak much English or Spanish. On his second day, he steps onto the track at the wrong moment. No one screams. There isn't time. The horn sounds, the cart jerks forward, and then, just like that, he's not standing anymore. It's quick, efficient, even. They cover the body with a tarp and move it behind the supply shed. The rest of you are told to take a short break, then go back to work. And you do, because the track keeps moving. Every now and then, someone suggests adding more safety precautions, better communication, more time between carts, flags, barriers, but nothing really changes. The Americans say, "We're on a schedule." That phrase carries weight. The schedule is the one thing more sacred than even the canal itself. One night, you sit with your boots off, feet soaking in a tin pan of cold water, listening to the distant rumble of another night shift train. You count the whistles, 1, 2, 3, before the sound fades into the trees. You wonder if people on the outside know about this part. About the men flattened by carts, buried under spoil, broken by machines they weren't trained to operate. Probably not. They'll talk about the engineering, the lock system, the shipping miracle. They won't talk about the rails that ran over someone's foot, someone's ribs, someone's dreams. The train doesn't know your name. You remember that every time it passes. And yet, you keep shoveling. Because the dirt won't move itself. Because there are more carts. Because, like the canal itself, the train doesn't care who you are, only that you keep the load coming. So you do. You lift, you heave, you step back on cue. And if the rail hums too loud beneath your feet, you move faster. Because in this place, hesitation isn't just dangerous. It's fatal. It starts with whispers. They come from corners, bunks, behind the latrines. Quiet words, exchanged in low voices, usually in Spanish, sometimes in French, occasionally in English or Creole. Not about work, not about pay, not even about the constant threat of disease. This time, the whispers are about people. Names you don't recognize, places that aren't even on the canal map. You're sitting near the mess tent one evening when a man from Cartagena leans over and asks, "You hear what happened in Colombia?" You shake your head, still focused on your soup. He leans in closer. "Some say Panama's about to change flags." You blink. Again. He nods. "Maybe even tonight." You laugh at first, thinking it's a joke. But the look on his face isn't joking. It's the expression of someone who's heard too many things, seen too many movements, and started connecting dots no one else has yet. And then, not long after, the flags do change. Colombia is out. Panama is declared an independent republic, practically overnight. The Americans are the first to recognize it. The ink on the telegrams is barely dry when they start reinforcing their presence in the canal zone. More guards, more patrols, more fences where fences didn't used to be. And suddenly, everything feels tense. You don't understand all the politics. You're not even sure who's in charge anymore. Is it Panama? The United States? The Canal Company? Some combination of all three? You just know that new people are watching you now. Men in uniforms. Men who ask questions you don't know how to answer. You hear about a worker who got taken in for questioning. No one says what he was questioned about. He just disappears for 3 days and comes back looking like someone cracked him open and then stitched him back up wrong. He won't speak about it. Just sits at the edge of camp, staring. Then a rumor starts, quiet at first but steady. Someone among the workers is a spy. Or maybe multiple. Not a spy like in novels with disguises and coded messages. No, this kind is simpler. A man who reports on what others say in the dark. Who listens at tents. Who writes names on lists. No one knows who it is. Or if it's true. But suddenly everyone is careful. Your friend Elijah, usually loud and full of jokes, starts checking over his shoulder before speaking. Careful what you say. He tells you one night. They got ears in the trees. You smile, trying to lighten the mood. The monkeys. He doesn't laugh. More than once, you catch someone watching you from a distance. Not a supervisor. Not a foreman. Just a man in clean boots and a pressed shirt, standing too still for too long. You look away. You've learned it's best not to look too long. Then one morning, an announcement is made. All foreign workers must re-register. You're herded into a tent with a line stretching around the supply depot. One by one, you step forward, say your name, your country, how long you've been here. They write it down. Ask if you've traveled outside the zone recently. Ask if you speak other languages. Ask who your bunkmates are. None of the questions seem wrong exactly, but there's something in the way they're asked. Like they're not really looking for answers, they're looking for reasons. That night, another man vanishes. His name was Luis, from Ecuador. You didn't know him well, but he shared his tobacco once. Then he's just gone. No one will say where he went, or why. And after a while, no one says his name anymore either. You begin to wonder what they're afraid of. It's not sabotage, at least not openly. You've never seen a tool broken on purpose, or a fire set in the supply tent. But there is unrest. Quiet things. Delays that don't make sense. Notes pass too fast. Workers asking too many questions about where the money's really going. About how the land was bought. About why Americans suddenly have so much say in a country they weren't even part of last year. You start hearing a new word. Revolution. Not shouted. Not sung. Just murmured, with the reverence usually reserved for saints or storms. The Americans don't like the word. You hear a new order come down. Any worker caught distributing political material will be dismissed. Some say deported. Some say worse. You don't test it. But you do notice a shift in the way people look at each other. The camaraderie is still there. Kind of. But it's thinner now, stretched under pressure. Every conversation feels like it has edges. One night, you're asked to carry a crate of supplies to a storage tent near the far end of camp. When you arrive, you hear voices inside. You pause. Not intentionally eavesdropping, just listening before you knock. Inside, someone says, "If we wait until they finish, it'll be too late." Another voice replies, "We don't need violence. Just a signal." You back away. Quietly, carefully. You don't say anything about it the next day. You're not sure who you can trust. This place, the canal, the jungle, the zone, has always been chaotic. But this is different. This is a kind of invisible pressure, like the sky is pressing down. Like you're standing in the eye of something that hasn't quite started spinning yet. And yet, the trains still run. The shovels still swing. The canal keeps crawling forward. Like none of it matters. Maybe that's the cruelest part. That no matter what side you're on, whether you whisper in corners or keep your head down, the trench gets deeper. The ocean inches closer. You lie in bed that night, hands behind your head, listening to the jungle. A bird cries out. A distant horn wails from a passing train. You hear footsteps near your tent and hold your breath, just for a second. Then they pass, and the silence rushes back in. You smell the celebration before you see it. Roast meat, fresh bread, real fruit. Someone even said ice cream. You didn't believe them at first, but now you can see the crates, white, frosty, stacked high like bricks made of luxury. There's bunting strung between buildings, brass bands tuning their instruments, and men in polished boots marching like they're part of something sacred. The canal is officially done. Not almost there. Not soon. Done. Finished. Complete. They're throwing a ceremony up near the Pacific side. Not in the trenches. Not in the barracks. Not where the dirt still clings to the soles of your boots. No. This is happening on a stage with speeches and flags and guests from all over the world. Someone imported flowers. Someone else brought crystal glasses. You're not invited. Most of you aren't. You watch from a hill, maybe, or from the edges, where the grass hasn't been trimmed and the chairs aren't gold-trimmed. You see suits. You see photographers. You see men who've never held a shovel standing proudly in front of the lock gates, posing like they're the ones who moved the mountain. You hear clapping. A ship, a real one, tall, clean, painted, glides through the lock, and the crowd erupts. This is it. The dream realized. The shortcut between oceans, finally carved into the earth like a signature from history itself. You don't cheer. Not because you're bitter. Or at least not just because of that. You're still covered in sweat. There's dirt under your nails. Your hands ache from the same work you were doing yesterday, maybe not digging, but cleaning up, stacking equipment, hauling out tools they're too proud to throw away just yet. You and dozens of others are still here, behind the scenes, putting away the parts of the story that won't be told. There are no cameras where you are. No medals, no commemorative portraits. You sit on a crate, squinting toward the water, and wonder if this is what finishing is supposed to feel like. Because if it is, it's surprisingly quiet. The canal itself is beautiful in a way. Why, geometric, sharp-edged and precise. Like someone took a ruler to the jungle and said, "Enough." The gates open and close with slow elegance. The locks rise and fall like breaths. You didn't think a machine could look graceful, but somehow this one does. And still, it feels unfinished. Not the concrete or the gears or the metal bolts, but the story, because you're not in it. You talk to a man named Thomas later that night. He's from St. Lucia. Been here almost as long as you have. He's sitting on a rail car, chewing something tough and sweet, watching the moon rise over the still water. You ask him how he feels about it all being done. He shrugs. "Ain't done for me," he says. "Still gotta carry boards tomorrow." You laugh, but he doesn't. "You think they'll remember us?" you ask. He chews a bit longer, then shakes his head. "They didn't write our names down on the way in. They won't write 'em down on the way out." You look out at the locks lit up like a stage play. Somewhere in the crowd, they're toasting. You imagine the words, vision, glory, future. No one's talking about the infections, the landslides, the heat that melted grown men to puddles of muscle and will. No one's talking about how many didn't make it. Some historians will, maybe, decades from now. Maybe they'll argue about numbers. How many died? How many just disappeared? Maybe they'll write books with titles like The Cost of Progress or Blood and Water. But will they write your name? You find a newspaper the next morning. Someone tossed it aside after the speeches. The headline reads, "A Triumph of Engineering." There's a photo of the lock gate, open wide, a ship floating proudly in the middle. You're not in the frame. None of you are. Later, a few of the workers try to carve initials into the side of a cement wall. Nothing grand, just something to prove you were here. One guy brings a nail, another a rock. You scratch your name in carefully, then sit back and look at it. It's small, almost invisible, but it's yours. When the last of the equipment is packed, you're told you'll be moved out within the month. Some to new jobs, some home. Some, well, no one really says. There are no farewell parades. No exit interview. You just keep cleaning until someone tells you not to. You watch the ships start to come through. Slow at first, one at a time, as the crews test the new locks. The sound of rushing water fills the air like breath returning to the jungle. You expect to feel proud. Instead, you feel tired. Not bad tired. Just full. Like a story that's been told too many times, with too many edits. You meet a man from Chicago, here on a short assignment, just to observe operations. He sees your calloused hands, your sun-battered face, and asks how long you've been here. Long enough, you say. He smiles and nods like that's a good answer. Then he asks if you know where the museum is. You tell him it's over the hill, past the flower beds, near the new white buildings. You wonder what they're putting in there. Maps? Models? Names? Probably not yours. And then the man is gone, walking toward polished history, while you go back to the tool shed to stack another row of things that built the world but won't be displayed in any glass case. You pause at the edge of the dock, watching a cargo ship rise in the lock like a cathedral on water. It's beautiful. It's done. And you? You're still here. You come back years later. Not because you planned to. Not really. Life took you elsewhere, another job, another country, maybe a family if you were lucky. But something about the canal always stayed with you. Like a splinter under the skin, too small to dig out, too deep to forget. And now, after all this time, you find yourself standing on the edge of the same earth you once helped carve open. It's different, of course. Cleaner. Paved. The jungle's been trimmed back and boxed in with fences and railings. There's a visitor's center now. Tour groups shuffle past holding guidebooks and ice cream cones. Some wear matching shirts. A teenager takes a selfie in front of the locks you once bled beside. You want to say something, but you don't. You follow the path toward the observation deck. It's wide and high, with benches and a sign that reads "Welcome to the Panama Canal." A modern marvel. The font is cheerful. There's a plaque under it explaining the years of construction, the change from French to American hands, the engineering breakthroughs. There's a paragraph about yellow fever. Another about logistics. But no names. Well, that's not entirely true. There are names, engineers, planners, administrators, presidents. You see Lesseps. You see Roosevelt. You see Goethals. All neat and bronze and polished. You don't see Clark. Or Ramon. Or Ezra. Or Marcel. Or Thomas. Or the kid from Curaçao whose name you never learned. You keep walking. Down a shaded path, past a locked gate, you find the memorial garden. Small. Tidy. Quiet. A few stone markers, a sculpture shaped like an open hand, and a plaque that says simply, "In memory of the workers who built the canal." It doesn't say how many. It doesn't say who. You stand there for a long time. Someone walks by, a tourist, maybe. She looks at you, smiles politely, then reads the plaque. She nods, takes a picture, moves on. You stay. You remember the smell of the mud after rain. The thrum of mosquitoes. The way your boots stuck in the clay like it didn't want to let you leave. You remember the shovels. The trains. The funerals before breakfast. You also remember laughter, quiet, tired, real. Shared food. Shared stories. A hand steadying yours when you almost collapsed from heat. Someone humming a hymn in the dark. That was real too. You trace your fingers along the edge of the stone. It's cool, smooth, untouched by the heat that still bakes the air. You wonder if anyone ever comes here who actually remembers. Or if, for most, it's just a stop between the gift shop and the cafe. Eventually, you leave the garden. Not because you want to, because it feels like the right thing to do. You pass another sign on the way out. This one's newer. A timeline of the canal's milestones. At the very bottom, in small letters, it says, "Tens of thousands of workers contributed to the canal's construction. Many came from the Caribbean, Europe, and Asia. Their sacrifices made this dream a reality." And that's it. That's your legacy, apparently. You walk back to the bus stop, and now, you've made it. All the way through. Not just the jungle and the mud and the mosquitoes, but the whole story. The sounds fade now. The clang of rail carts, the shuffle of boots, the quiet coughs behind the canvas walls. Even the canal itself, so loud and proud, begins to settle in your mind like a calm tide pulling back from the shore. Let yourself breathe. No more shouting foremen. No more paperwork you can't read. No more digging. Just stillness. You can picture it now. Your hands finally clean. Your boots drying by a door that isn't canvas. The sun gentler on your skin. Maybe you're sitting somewhere quiet, listening to the creak of a rocking chair and the hum of crickets instead of mosquitoes. Maybe you're telling this story to someone who wasn't there, who doesn't quite believe you, but listens anyway. You earned that peace. Even if the world never carved your name in stone, you remember. And sometimes that's enough. So close your eyes. Let the jungle dissolve. Let the steam